My name is Anjali. I'm 29 Tamil, and until a few months ago, I thought I had a strong sense of what mattered: family, tradition, and dignity. My wedding was the most significant day of my life so far. Like many Tamil brides, I wore two saris, one from my family and one from my in-laws. But the one that truly mattered, the one I chose for my vows, the one I wrapped around me like ancestral armor, was my kurai sari, gifted by my parents. A deep red with intricate zari patterns and tiny golden mango leaves that shimmered under temple lights. My grandmother wept when I wore it. My mother beamed like it was her second wedding. My father whispered blessings into the folds as he helped drape it. In our culture, there's a tradition: the bride wears her wedding sari again at the next wedding she attends. It's a symbol of good fortune, continuity, and shared blessings. You become a walking vessel of marital hope, passing the joy to the next bride. That next bride, as fate would have it, was my cousin's sister Kirthana. She's 27, Tamil like me, though her branch of the family has always lived a bit loosely around tradition. They honor it when convenient, but don't center their lives around it. Kirthana agreed to a traditional wedding, yes, but it was more about appeasing our grandmother than any deep spiritual pull. Still, I wanted to respect her space. So about a month after my own wedding, I visited her at home. We were in her room, her cat sprawled across the bed, air smelling faintly of coconut oil and jasmine incense. I asked her softly, not wanting to impose, "Would it be okay if I wore my kurai sari to your wedding? I know it's a tradition, but I don't want to take away from your day." She smiled, nodded, said, "Of course. I totally get it. I wouldn't mind at all." I remember that moment with crystal clarity. I even offered to wear something else if she felt weird, but she seemed genuinely unbothered. Weeks passed. As the wedding drew near, I checked again on a call this time. I asked her plainly, "Still okay with me wearing the sari?" Her voice was light, casual. "Yup, totally fine." Even on the wedding day itself, I visited her bridal suite in the early morning. Her makeup hadn't started yet. She looked radiant, if a bit anxious. I showed her my folded sari. "Last chance. If this will upset you, I'll go change right now." She laughed. "You're so sweet. It's your sari. Wear it, please." So I wore it, not with bridal makeup or my full wedding jewelry, just the sari, a light necklace, and a bindi. It was subtle, respectful. When I walked into the wedding hall, I felt proud, not flashy, not attention-seeking, just grounded in meaning. Most of our guests were American, many in formal Western dresses, some in cocktail attire, a few Tamil relatives in saris and lehengas, nothing outrageous. But then Kirthana entered. Her bridal sari was unsurprisingly also red, heavily embroidered, glamorous. She looked stunning, and that's when everything cracked. Guests started whispering. The comparison was unavoidable. Two women, two red saris. One bride, one recent bride. My joy curdled into self-consciousness. I wanted to hide, not because I thought I looked better, but because I could feel the eyes, the speculation, the subtle gasps. But I never imagined what came next. Her mother and mother-in-law approached. They pulled me aside into a side room with her older sister. It was swift, like a surgical strike. No greetings, no questions, just heat. "How could you wear red? You're trying to steal attention. You disrespected the family." I blinked. My palms turned cold. I tried to speak. I asked her. I checked. Several times. She said. That's when Kirthana barged in. Tears streaming, rage vibrating off her. "You didn't ask. You never asked." My stomach dropped. The betrayal wasn't the yelling. It wasn't even the lies. It was the gaslighting. That cold, calculated denial, I stammered, repeating the times I'd asked her. In her room, on the phone, that very morning. But I had no texts, no written proof, nothing but memory and her smile, now turned against me. I tried to leave. I told them I'd go change. I just wanted peace. But when I found my husband to explain, 3 security guards were already there, ready to escort us out. Like criminals. Like threats. We didn't shout, we didn't protest, we left. Outside the venue, I stood in the sun, sari sticking to my skin, tears burning my cheeks hotter than the fabric ever could. And that was only the beginning. When I left the wedding, I felt like I was walking in a haze. It wasn't just the heat or the weight of the sari, it was the sheer magnitude of disbelief. One moment I was someone's cousin, a respected bride upholding tradition. The next, I was branded the villain of the family. And that label stuck harder than I ever imagined. By the time I reached home and peeled off the sari, my phone had already started vibrating non-stop. At first, I thought maybe it was one or two curious relatives trying to get the full story, but no, it was dozens of messages, missed calls, voice notes, emails. The first message I opened simply read, "I didn't think you were that kind of person." Then another, "You really tried to outshine her on her day? That's disgusting." I sat on the floor, knees to my chest, rereading them in disbelief. Apparently, the story that spread was this: I had shown up in bridal red to intentionally draw attention to myself, that I had done it to spark jealousy, that I had lied and manipulated Kirthana into agreeing, then sprung a surprise on her in public. None of it was true. But when you're not the bride and the bride's crying truth becomes irrelevant, emotion wins. Then came the post. Her mother, my aunt, posted a long dramatic paragraph on her Instagram story, drenched in moral grandstanding. This world is losing its values. In the age of self-worship, some people will set fire to their own family for a chance to be the center of attention, a main character complex wrapped in silk and selfishness. She didn't tag me. She didn't need to. Everyone knew. Her story was reshared by Kirthana, her sister, her in-laws, her bridesmaids, and a few of our extended cousins. Some added their own captions like, "Can't believe she did that," or "We saw it coming." One even said, "That's why I never trusted her." I read those words over and over, a lump forming in my throat. My stomach turned when I realized this wasn't just about me wearing a red sari. This was about history. This was about narratives already written. Growing up, I was always the polite one, the one who followed rituals, the golden child who set the table properly, who listened to the elders, who touched feet, who remembered birthdays. Kirthana was different. She questioned rules, rebelled against expectations, and while I admired her for it, there had always been tension. Now, it felt like this wedding was her revenge, her moment to rewrite our family story. And I had given her the perfect opportunity. The worst part, no one asked for my side. My relatives, people who had known me since birth, just accepted the story as gospel. At first, my parents defended me, my mother said. "You asked her permission. I was there when you talked to her the first time," my father said. "It's tradition. Everyone should know better." But when the backlash started affecting them through social calls, messages from other relatives, people whispering at community gatherings, they began to shift. It was subtle at first. My mom started saying things like, "Maybe you should have worn something simpler. You know how sensitive Kirthana can be." Then finally, one night after dinner, my father said, "We just want things to calm down. Maybe it's best you apologize and let it go." Let it go. Like it was that simple. Let go of being humiliated in front of hundreds of people. Let go of being kicked out like a criminal. Let go of being labeled a narcissist when all I did was follow tradition. It felt like death by 1,000 cuts. Every call, every message, every silence from a once close relative chipped away at the foundation I thought I had. I stayed off social media, I ignored messages, I curled up in my apartment with my husband who, thank God, never wavered. He told me, "You did nothing wrong. I saw it. You asked her. You showed her the sorry. You gave her every opportunity to say no. This is on them, not you." He was my anchor. And yet, the doubt still crept in. Late at night, when the world went quiet, I'd whisper to him, "What if I did miss something? What if I didn't read the room? What if it was all a mistake?" He held my hand tighter each time and reminded me, "You didn't crash her wedding. You respected your culture. You asked repeatedly." Still, I couldn't stop spiraling. Why did no one else see it? Why did truth matter so little? Why was I now the cautionary tale? I began to realize that this wasn't just about the sorry or even the wedding. It was about a power dynamic in our family. I had always been the quiet, respectful one, and for some people, that meant I was expected to stay quiet, expected to never take up space, expected to never shine unless given permission. But the moment I did something bold in their eyes, something visible, something cultural, they didn't see it as a celebration of tradition. They saw it as betrayal. They weren't punishing me for the sorry. They were punishing me for having the audacity to be visible. I didn't leave my apartment for 4 days. I had called in sick to work, shut off social notifications, and refused to answer unknown numbers. Every time the doorbell rang, my chest tightened. Every ring, every buzz felt like another accusation waiting to claw at my already bruised sense of self. But grief has a strange rhythm. It doesn't just sit quietly, it pulses, it mutates, and eventually it burns. On day 5, I sat up in bed, looked into the mirror, and realized something unsettling. I had begun to believe their version of me. That I was selfish, arrogant, attention-hungry. Me who had asked for permission 3 separate times. Who had offered to change outfits even on the wedding day. Who had followed the very tradition we all claimed to honor was now internalizing their lies. That's when I snapped. Not in fury, not in violence, but in clarity. This wasn't just about me being cast out. It was about a larger sickness, how people and families can weaponize shame to control others, how power in some circles doesn't come from honesty or tradition, but from narrative ownership. Kirthana and her family had taken the truth and twisted it like soft clay into a version that served them. They weren't just angry at the sorry, they were threatened by me stepping outside the box they had quietly assigned me. The quiet cousin, the supportive cousin, the one who claps from the corner but never dares to shine. That was the role. And I'd broken it. So I decided I wouldn't argue, I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't send counter-paragraphs on Instagram or gather witnesses to testify on my behalf. I'd reclaim my story on my terms. Step 1. Documentation. I went through my call logs and calendars. Every time I had contacted Kirthana to discuss the sorry, I noted the date, time, and general context. Even though I didn't have recordings, I knew when those conversations happened. I even found a couple of text follow-ups where I'd said things like, "Thanks again for the green light on the sorry." Subtle but useful. Step 2. My grandmother. Kirthana's wedding had, after all, been a traditional one because of our grandmother's wishes. And if there was one person in the family who could balance cultural loyalty with emotional intelligence, it was her. I visited her a week after the wedding, wearing a simple cotton kurta, bearing sweets and jasmine flowers. She opened the door, smiled, but her eyes were cautious. I could feel it. We sat for tea, mostly in silence. Finally, she spoke. "Anjali, I don't know what happened, but it hurt to see you walk out like that." I told her everything. Not defensively, not tearfully, just truthfully. I didn't try to make Kirthana a villain. I didn't embellish. I told her I asked repeatedly. I told her I offered to change. I told her the sorry wasn't about attention, it was about respect, about tradition, about her. She listened, quietly, stirred her tea in slow circles. Then she nodded. "I believe you, and I'm sorry this happened." That single sentence was oxygen. Validation. It reminded me that I wasn't insane, that memory was real, that I wasn't imagining the quiet betrayal. We spoke for over an hour. She agreed not to intervene directly, she didn't want to spark more drama. But she told me, "Don't try to convince those who have already chosen not to understand you." She was right. Which led me to step 3 strategy. I wasn't going to fight fire with fire. That's what they expected. A messy meltdown, a rebuttal, a screaming match at some future family gathering. No. I would be quieter, smarter, more precise. I began posting photos. Not of the wedding. Of my wedding. Moments in my kurai sari, surrounded by family, holding my mother's hand, laughing with cousins including Kirthana, a slow drip feed of tradition, joy, and context. In the captions, I wrote about Tamil customs, the significance of the kurai sari, the quiet strength of women who honor tradition not through noise, but through grace. I didn't tag anyone. But people saw. They started commenting, messaging. Some asked polite questions I never knew about this tradition. Thanks for sharing. Others wrote things like, "Wow, Kirthana wore red too. Right, this looks so similar." A few messaged privately, saying, "Now it makes sense. I'm so sorry you were treated that way. I didn't respond to most. Because the point wasn't revenge, it was revelation. It was letting the truth sit in the open, without force. A truth that couldn't be denied, only quietly absorbed. And then something happened I didn't expect. Kirthana's fiancé, now husband, messaged me. His words were simple. Hey, I just want to say I know things got out of hand. I didn't know the full story until recently. I'm sorry you had to go through that. It wasn't much, but it cracked open something. Because if he was questioning the narrative, maybe others were too. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't vindicated in any grand cinematic way. There were no apologies screamed in public, no dramatic confessions of guilt from my cousin's mother, and definitely no "we were wrong" Facebook posts. But something had shifted. The silence was softer now. When people saw me at the temple or at grocery stores, they didn't avert their gaze like I was radioactive. Some even smiled awkwardly as if unsure whether they were allowed to. I didn't give them an answer, I just smiled back. Let them sit with their uncertainty. Let them wonder whether they had misjudged me. But deep down, I wanted more than just a few awkward glances and private messages, not for revenge, but for balance, for dignity, for truth to be publicly remembered, not privately whispered. So I planned something. Something subtle, something cultural, something they couldn't argue with. It started with a simple idea, honoring tradition publicly without needing anyone's permission this time. I reached out to a local Tamil women's cultural collective. They were hosting an event to celebrate Tamil wedding traditions, with a focus on preserving customs that are slowly being forgotten. And wouldn't you know it, they were looking for someone to do a visual presentation and talk about the significance of the Kurai sari. I said yes. I didn't do it to stir drama. I did it because it mattered, because after being humiliated for respecting tradition, I wanted to show that honoring your roots isn't just acceptable, it's worthy of celebration. I prepared a slideshow. I included photographs from my wedding, close-ups of the sari, and even snippets of oral history from my grandmother. I explained how the Kurai sari symbolizes continuity, blessings, and legacy. And then I did something bolder. I wore the sari. Yes, that sari. My Kurai. The very one that got me kicked out of my cousin's wedding. But this time, I wore it without apology, without seeking permission, without any attempt to tone it down. And when I stepped into the event hall, the lights catching the silk just right, I felt radiant. Not flashy, not trying to steal the spotlight, just whole. The presentation went beautifully. There were tears, applause, questions from younger women who had never heard these stories, elder women who thanked me for bringing back pride to what they'd once taken for granted. A journalist from a local cultural publication even asked if they could do a profile piece. I agreed. A week later, the article went live. It was titled, "Reviving Heritage, a Young Tamil Woman's Journey Through Culture, Conflict, and Courage." The pictures, my sari, my grandmother, my story. It didn't mention the wedding. I never spoke Kirthana's name, but anyone who had been paying attention knew. This was my statement. A graceful, factual, irrefutable response. And the ripple effects. They came. Quietly, deliciously. My uncle Kirthana's father called my mom a few days later and said, "Did you see that article? Looks like Anjali is doing something good for the community. Maybe we overreacted." Overreacted. He didn't say wrong, he didn't apologize. But it was enough. Word spread quickly in the family circles. Suddenly, I wasn't the narcissist cousin who upstaged the bride. I was the woman who brought culture into the spotlight, who educated, who honored tradition when others forgot it. Kirthana didn't call me, she didn't message, but I noticed she quietly archived her Instagram story, the one with the quote about egocentrism and main character syndrome. Gone. And for the first time since her wedding, she posted nothing about it. No anniversary throwback, no best day of my life post. Just silence. Maybe it meant nothing. Or maybe, just maybe, she finally felt the sting of being outshined not by sparkle or drama, but by integrity. Then came the moment I knew I had won. My grandmother invited me to perform a small ceremony with her at an upcoming family gathering. Not Kirthana. Me. I asked her why. She said, Because you remember where you came from, and because you did not humiliate people, you carried the tradition with dignity. That matters more than noise. It was poetic justice, not the loud, Hollywood kind, but the real kind. The kind where you stand in the same rooms where people once whispered about you and they now offer you tea. The kind where truth doesn't scream, it simply exists. Quiet, unshakable. And it lives longer than gossip. There's a strange weight to being seen again. Not admired, not pitied, just seen. For weeks after the cultural event and article release, I noticed the temperature of the room had changed, figuratively and literally. I didn't feel the same frostbite when attending gatherings or running into relatives. The tension was still there, but diluted. It was like people weren't sure which story to believe anymore. Kirthana's narrative had been loud, dramatic, and immediate. Mine, slow, deliberate, informed by culture and laced with calm clarity. And in the long run, it had staying power. At the next family puja, I arrived quietly with my husband, in a pale blue sari, understated but elegant. No one gasped, no one pointed, but I saw the glances. They weren't disdainful this time, they were observant. Some were even curious. My uncle, Kirthana's father, gave me a small nod across the room. Not warm, but not cold either, like someone acknowledging a chess move they hadn't seen coming. And when I went to the prayer area, I noticed the elders, my grandmother, great aunt, and one of my father's older cousins shifted to make room for me. It was subtle, but in our culture, space means respect, and they had offered me space. I accepted it with quiet gratitude. After the prayers, as we gathered around the food area, an aunt approached me. She whispered, "I didn't understand before. I thought you were showing off. But after that article, after hearing from your grandmother, I see it now. I'm sorry." I smiled and nodded. I didn't need the apology to be loud, just sincere. And then came a message I hadn't expected. From Kirthana. She sent a DM, just one line. "You made your point, I hope you're happy." It wasn't angry. It was brittle, thinly veiled defeat. She didn't say I was right, but that wasn't the goal anymore. She had lost control of the story, and that mattered more than any apology she could force out. I replied, "I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted to be respected, that's all." She didn't respond again. And that was fine. More interesting, though, was the wave of private support I received, not from the usual suspects, but from younger cousins, acquaintances, even some of her friends who had been at the wedding. One messaged, "Honestly, I thought you were being extra at the wedding, but when I read your article and learned about the tradition, I realized we were just ignorant. Kirthana made it sound like you ambushed her, but it's clear now that wasn't the case." Another DM came from one of the Indian guests at the wedding. "I've been to 6 Tamil weddings and I still didn't know about the Kurai rule. You handled it with grace, respect." But perhaps the most touching one, a girl from the cultural collective messaged, "My mom never passed on our traditions. Seeing you talk about them made me want to learn more. I've started recording my grandmother's stories now. Thank you." And that was everything. Because the original reason I wore the sari wasn't to be admired, it was to remember, to honor, to participate in something older than gossip and prettier than politics. I wasn't trying to be the main character in someone else's wedding. I was just trying to be a woman of heritage in a modern world. A world that often wants us to erase ourselves to make others comfortable. And now that world was starting to understand, not fully, not unanimously, but enough. What about my parents? Well, they were tricky. Initially, they had stood by me. Then, as public backlash threatened their image, they pulled away. But after the article and the gradual shift in perception, they found their way back. My mother called one afternoon and said, "Your father and we didn't know how to handle all the attention. We panicked, but we shouldn't have turned our backs on you. We're sorry." I didn't give her an easy out, but I didn't shut the door either. I told her, "I get it, but next time, stand with me before the storm passes." And what about me? I was lighter. Not healed entirely, some wounds don't scar cleanly, but I was no longer carrying the boulder of shame I hadn't earned. I had my dignity, my truth, my sorry. And slowly, the whispers of narcissist were replaced by stories of courage, culture, and comeback. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it just outlives the lie. They say time heals all wounds. But I've learned it's not time that does the healing, it's truth. And not just the truth you tell others, but the kind you finally allow yourself to believe. The truth you stop running from. The truth that sits with you in silence and says, you were never the villain in this story. In the weeks and months that followed, I returned to something I hadn't done in a long time: journaling. At first, I wrote because I needed a place to empty the mess in my head, but slowly, it became a way to understand, to analyze, to not just relive but reframe. And through that process, I realized something painful, but liberating. I had spent most of my life apologizing for occupying space. Not just physical space, but cultural, emotional, even symbolic space. At family events, I'd always tried to be agreeable, palatable, never too loud, too opinionated, too present. I would shrink to avoid being too much, especially around people like Kirthana, who believed attention was a currency to be hoarded. But wearing that sari, that changed everything. It wasn't about cloth or color. It was about presence. About saying, I deserve to be here as I am, with history behind me and dignity intact. And that is why it stung so deeply when they tried to erase me from her wedding, when they dragged me out with security. It wasn't just a humiliation, it was a declaration. You are not welcome in the story. But here's the twist. I don't need to be in their story. I get to write my own. You can ask someone for approval 100 times, and they'll say yes with a smile, right up until they see you shine. Because what they really wanted was your compliance, not your presence. This one took time. We grow up believing that family means protection, that blood means loyalty. But sometimes, family is the first place you learn betrayal, and recognizing that doesn't make you heartless, it makes you honest. Traditions aren't costumes to be worn when convenient and discarded when uncomfortable. They are rooted in meaning, history, and identity. If someone weaponizes culture only when it benefits them, they're not upholding it, they're exploiting it. For a while, I tried desperately to defend myself, to correct every rumor, to prove I wasn't what they claimed. But I learned that perception is a house built by others. What you can control is the foundation of yourself, not pettiness, not clapbacks, not even public vindication. Just calm, consistent, unshakable dignity. The kind that doesn't need an audience. The kind that outlasts gossip. I know many of you watching have been in similar situations. Maybe not with saris and weddings, but with friends who betrayed you. With relatives who twisted your kindness. With coworkers who made you feel small. Or parents who only loved you conditionally. Let me tell you this, from the core of my being. You are not selfish for standing up for yourself. You are not difficult for having boundaries. You are not arrogant for shining in spaces that were designed to dim you. Let them call you dramatic. Let them whisper behind your back. Let them uninvite you, unfollow you, or misunderstand you. Because one day, when the noise dies down and the dust settles, what always remains is truth. And truth, my friends, doesn't rot. It waits. It blooms when no one's watching. It turns humiliation into heritage. To this day, I keep that kurai sari folded in a special box, not just as a memory of my wedding, but as a symbol of resistance, of reclaiming, of reminding that no matter what room I walk into, I belong. Story 2. I'm Rowan Elwood, 34, the daughter. No one in the Elwood clan really saw coming. Not in the sense of a surprised child, no. I was planned, but I was the quiet one, the cerebral one, the one who spoke when spoken to and never gave them a reason to brag or panic. Not like my sister, Belle Beautiful, loud, magnetic Belle, the walking headline. I almost didn't attend her wedding. I had 12 good reasons not to, including a flight to Zurich the next morning and a deep-seated allergy to forced family bonding. But then Mom called. It's Belle's big day. Rowan, you will be there. Wear something decent at least. And that was that. So I did what I always do. I showed up. Neat, neutral, invisible. My charcoal dress whispered class without speaking up. My heels barely echoed on the marble floor. My lipstick was mauve, because red was Belle's color and God help anyone who competed. The venue, the Eastbrook Conservatory, a glass palace dripping with fairy lights and custom orchids, it was exactly Belle. Dazzling, loud, painfully expensive. I arrived 10 minutes after the start time, just enough to avoid the chaos of family photos, but not so late that I'd be accused of being rude. My mother found me by the bar before I could order a drink. "That's what you wore?" she asked, her voice wrapped in a smile so thin it could slit skin. "Good to see you too," I replied. She gave me a once-over. "You look fine, but something tailored next time, Rowan. This isn't a charity luncheon." I bit the inside of my cheek. She never asked about my work, never had. Probably still thought I was doing graphic design for local coffee shops, which was hilarious, considering 2 weeks ago I'd signed a deal with a German biotech giant to revamp their global interface. But I didn't say that. I just nodded and retreated into the floral jungle that was the guest seating area. That was always my role, the extra in someone else's story, especially Belle's. She made her entrance 20 minutes late, to thunderous applause, glittering in a white satin custom gown, arm in arm with her new husband, Liam, heir to the Carter financial empire. The whispers started before she even reached the front. "Did you hear about the prenup? She negotiated her own, and she's already talking about a podcast deal." When she spotted me, Belle lit up with her usual overperformed warmth. "Rowan, you made it." Her voice carried just enough for nearby guests to hear. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, matching her smile with one that didn't quite reach my eyes. "You still doing that branding thing?" "UX strategy," I corrected gently. Right, small business stuff, right." I sipped my drink, something like that. She patted my shoulder like I was a kind waitress. "Well, at least you're keeping busy." I could have reminded her that her wedding planner once begged to license my website interface for his portfolio, or that my client list included 2 Forbes 100 companies. But what was the point? Belle needed me to be lesser, and for years, I let her have that. The reception spun into a blur of speeches and toasts. I stayed near the edges, watching Belle soak up the spotlight like a sunflower, radiant, performative, adored. Until the announcement, Belle tapped her glass with a fork, her voice carrying across the ballroom like a polished PR reel. "Thank you all for being here. Liam and I are thrilled, but tonight's extra special because someone very important is joining us soon." I raised an eyebrow. No one had mentioned a guest speaker. She smiled coyly. "Bryce Langston will be arriving shortly." A collective gasp rippled across the room. Bryce Langston, CEO of Langston Ventures, the same man who'd been chasing my firm for months, who'd flooded my inbox with offers, requests, proposals, all of which I'd declined. I didn't flinch, I simply finished my champagne. The doors opened moments later. Bryce walked in like money in human form, silver temples, charcoal suit, the weight of 1,000 boardrooms in his gait. He scanned the room, paused, and then zeroed in on me. The bride and groom didn't even register on his radar. "Rowan Elwood," he said, shaking my hand. "I was hoping to see you here." Dead silence. Belle's face froze. Liam glanced around, confused. "I didn't expect you at a wedding," Bryce continued. "We've been eager to hear your feedback on our offer." I smiled, still evaluating. You should know my board is ready when you are." The room shifted like tectonic plates. Belle blinked. "Wait, you know her?" Bryce turned, as if realizing she was part of the scene. "You're Belle, right? The one marrying into Carter Capital." She nodded. Slowly, he tilted his head. "Didn't you say your sister ran a boutique design service?" "She does," Belle said, her voice brittle. Bryce's brow furrowed. "Rowan's team just redesigned the interface for Zurich Bank and closed a 5-year deal with Biogen. She's not boutique, she's category defining." Belle opened her mouth, nothing came out. I turned to her. "You never asked what I did." The air had gone still. My mother's jaw was slack. My uncle's wine glass trembled. Belle looked like someone had set her Dior heels on fire. The spotlight she'd curated so carefully now hung squarely above me. And for once I didn't step out of the light. The Velvet Lounge was supposed to be a private escape for the wedding party, a sanctuary of blush roses and softly glowing sconces. But tonight, it became something else entirely. A war room, a confession booth, a battleground layered in silk and family tension. Belle stormed in first, bouquet in one hand, fury in the other. What the hell was that? Rowan, I didn't flinch. You'll need to be more specific. Don't play cute. You knew Bryce Langston was coming. No, I said, calmly. You invited him. I just didn't correct the assumption that you were the most powerful Elwood in the room. Her eyes narrowed. You humiliated me. I folded my arms. You did that all on your own. Liam slipped in behind her, visibly uncomfortable. While our parents stood frozen near the doorway, Dad's tie was askew, and Mom's pearls didn't shine quite as brightly anymore. You could have given us a heads up, Mom finally said. Would it have changed anything, I asked? You would have asked me not to show up, or worse, to tone it down. Like always. Dad rubbed the back of his neck. Sweetheart, we just didn't know. Exactly. I cut in. You never asked. You never wondered why I stopped coming home for holidays, why I never invited you to launch parties or client summits. You assumed I had nothing to show. Belle was pacing now, her veil dragging like a forgotten train. You've always acted so above us, so mysterious. Why keep it all a secret if you weren't just waiting for a moment like this? I didn't keep it a secret, I said. I just stopped performing. There's a difference. Liam, bless his sweet, confused heart, finally spoke. Wait, are you saying you're the Rowan Elwood Bryce keeps mentioning in meetings? I nodded once. He blinked. Jesus. The silence that followed was heavier than any sermon. My mother sank into a velvet armchair, lips pale. Dad avoided my gaze, the way he always did when facts clashed with his favorites. Belle stepped forward. You know they always worried about you, she said. All those late nights, the traveling, the way you never settled down. I raised a hand. Stop. You don't get to spin this into concern. You all built a narrative about me, the struggling, serious sister who couldn't land a man or a mortgage. That suited you. You needed me small so you could stay big. That's not true, Mom said quietly. Then name one accomplishment of mine you've ever acknowledged. The silence spoke louder than anything else. I stepped toward the glass bar cart and poured myself another drink. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't rise. That was the thing about long-buried truths once they surfaced. They didn't scream, they whispered, and they echoed. Belle's voice cracked. So what now? You just get to be the surprise genius, the secret weapon. No, I said, I get to be me. Finally, publicly. And the acquisition, Liam asked, is it real? I looked him in the eye. It's already in motion. Langston Ventures will be merging with Elwood Strategy Group. You know the firm Bryce wanted to acquire? I glanced at Belle. That's mine. Dad stood straighter. You own it. Co-founded it. Majority shareholder. CEO. He sat down. It felt like dropping a stone into a still lake. Ripples of realization moved outward across decades of underestimation. Through layers of polite dismissal and familial gaslighting, the quiet daughter they'd all overlooked had just flipped the family hierarchy like a table. I didn't come here to flex. I said finally, I came to show up like you asked me to. Belle folded her arms. And yet, here we are. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She wasn't ready to hear that I didn't plan for this moment. I didn't plant bombs in the floral arrangements or script Bryce's entrance like a dramatic reveal. I simply stopped ducking the spotlight. The irony, they handed it to me. Bryce only came because of Belle. He walked into the room thinking he was making a business connection through a family wedding. Instead, he found the woman who had already outmaneuvered him. Mom rose from her seat slowly. I don't know how we missed it. You didn't miss it, I said. You looked away. That hurt landed deep. I stepped toward the door. I'll leave you to it. I think the cake cutting is next. Dad cleared his throat. Rowan? I paused. We are proud of you. I turned slowly. Don't be. You didn't build me. You buried me. I just learned how to bloom anyway. And with that, I walked out, back into the ballroom, where the guests were buzzing like bees trapped in a jar. Half of them had probably already Googled me. The other half were watching Bryce Langston chat with my co-founder near the dessert bar. But I didn't stop for the cameras. I didn't pose or explain or bask. I just took my seat quietly like I always had. But this time, they noticed. This time, everyone did. It had been 5 days since the wedding, and still, the messages hadn't stopped. Emails from execs who once wouldn't have taken a second meeting with a woman like me now requesting introductions, begging for calendar slots. My LinkedIn inbox was a digital floodplain, requests, congratulations, opportunistic nostalgia from college classmates who once laughed at my thrifted heels. But the messages that mattered most came quietly. A text from Liam. I had no idea, I'm sorry. A voice memo from my old calculus teacher. I always knew you'd do something remarkable. They just weren't ready for it. And then, one from Belle. Just a single line. Was any of it ever real between us? I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, out of preservation. Because I knew what she was really asking. Did I ever matter to you more than I mattered to myself? And the answer, honest and raw, was no, not more, not first, not anymore. I needed space. So I took it. I booked a flight to Lisbon. Alone. No assistant, no entourage, no itinerary. Just me, a leather-bound notebook, and a rented apartment overlooking a street that smelled of espresso and ocean air. For the first time in years, I exhaled without bracing. One morning, sitting on a tiled balcony, I flipped open my journal and began writing a letter to the version of myself who had sat alone at family dinners, who had swallowed her brilliance to make room for other people's comfort. I wrote, "You were never weak for being quiet. You were strategic. You watched. You waited. You built in silence. And now the world is hearing you roar. Let them—" And still, the phone rang. This time it was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice cracked through the speaker like frost on a windshield. She was trying to sound composed, but the tremble betrayed her. "Rowan, please, we need to talk. Belle isn't herself. Your father, he's devastated. We didn't realize how much we misunderstood you. And now—" She paused, breathed. "Now we're afraid we've lost you." She wasn't wrong. But losing someone doesn't always mean a door slams shut. Sometimes, it just means the hinges no longer creak for you. I didn't call her back. Instead, I called my legal team. Draw up the final contracts. I said, let's close the merger. The next 2 weeks moved fast. The acquisition hit the press. Business blogs buzzed. Forbes called it the most unexpected female-led takeover in tech this year. In every interview, I said the same thing. I'm not here to disrupt. I'm here to redesign. Quietly, intelligently. One morning, while reviewing transition memos, Bryce Langston himself called. "Rowan," he said, "I underestimated you." "That's not unique," I replied. He laughed. I deserved that. He paused. "What happens to the Elwood name after this?" I leaned back in my chair. It survives. But this time, it adapts to me, not the other way around. "Good," he said, "because you're about to become the story every daughter of every closed-door family will tell at board meetings and wine nights." I hung up and stared out the window. He didn't know the half of it. That week, Belle showed up. Not at my office. At a community panel I'd agreed to speak on women in leadership stories from the shadows. It was held in a modest auditorium. No chandeliers, no photographers, just folding chairs and honest questions. Belle sat in the back. She didn't wave, didn't cry. She listened. When it was over, she approached slowly. "Do you still hate me?" she asked. I considered, no, I outgrew that. She looked relieved. "I want to do better." "Then start." "I don't know how." I offered the simplest truth I had, by listening without thinking of what you'll say next. Belle didn't nod. She just stood still, like a child learning what gravity feels like for the first time. When she finally walked away, she left something behind, her arrogance. And somehow, that felt more powerful than any apology. That night, I returned to my apartment, kicked off my heels, and stared at the ceiling. I didn't feel victorious. I felt peaceful. That was the point all along. A year passed. Not loud, not fast, just steady, like breath returning after being held too long. The Elwood name didn't vanish. It transformed. The company, once synonymous with performative success and paper-thin innovation, now stood for something else: resilience, precision, leadership with depth, not noise. And me, I didn't gloat. I didn't decorate the walls of my new office with headlines or accolades. I kept them clean, minimal. A single photo of a forest trail, the one I used to walk as a kid when home got too loud. I met with Belle once a month. Not as sisters, not yet. As people trying to relearn how to see each other. She was working, truly working, not at Arvent anymore, but at a startup incubator she found on her own. No help, no strings. She still had moments of regression, where old habits clawed at the surface, but she caught them faster. That, to me, mattered more than change. It meant effort. One afternoon, while we sipped coffee in a quiet corner cafe, she asked, "Do you ever wish it had been different, that we'd grown up equal?" I thought about it. I used to. Now, I just wish I'd spoken up sooner. Belle nodded. You know, when I saw Richard Carr cross the ballroom to greet you that night, it felt like watching the world turn upside down. I smiled. It wasn't upside down, and it was finally right side up. We talked until the cafe closed. No scripts, no veiled barbs, just real things. My parents, though, that was a different path. They sent flowers once, an apology card, signed but not personalized. It read like a statement their lawyer might have drafted. I didn't respond. Because forgiveness doesn't always look like a reunion. Sometimes, it's simply letting the bitterness go and choosing not to reopen a door you spent years learning to close. I didn't hate them, not anymore, but I also didn't miss them. Their silence had raised me. It had been my mirror, my forge, my crucible. And I had stepped out of that silence not bitter, but better. One chilly spring morning, I stood at a school gymnasium. I'd been invited to speak to a group of high school seniors, mostly girls from working-class families. Kids like I used to be. I wore jeans, a plain navy blazer, no script, no slideshow. I told them the truth. That I was the girl who sat at the back of rooms, the one who never got picked for teams, or noticed at birthdays, or praised for showing up. I told them I didn't explode into power, I evolved into it, quietly, like erosion, slow but unstoppable. Nala raised her hand, trembling. How do you know when it's time to stop waiting for them to see you? I looked her in the eyes. When you realize you already see yourself, and that's enough. They clapped. Not out of politeness, but recognition. Later, as I packed my things, the principal approached. "You just changed a few lives," she said. I smiled. They changed mine first. That night, back home, I sat on the balcony with a cup of green tea and an old book in my lap. The city shimmered below, above. Stars blinked like old friends. I thought about every time I'd bitten my tongue, dimmed my spark, silenced my story. And now I had my voice, I had my name, and I had a legacy not of wealth or noise or parties with photographers, but of impact. Quiet, lasting, mine. Not all stories end with reunions, some end with clarity. And sometimes, the most beautiful ending isn't walking back into the house that never welcomed you, it's building one of your own where others can finally feel seen. So if you're watching this, listening, reading, and you've ever felt forgotten, erased, belittled, know this. You don't need the spotlight to shine. Let your quiet become your fire. Let your work echo. Let your silence strategize. Because when the world finally turns to look at you, don't flinch. Step forward and take your place. Story 3. They say blood is thicker than water. I used to believe that until I found myself lying alone in a hospital bed, stitched up after an emergency operation, and my cousin walked out mid-sentence because her spa appointment was more urgent. My name is Rowan Latimer. I'm 38, a data systems architect, and for the last 7 years, I let my cousin and her husband live in my lakefront house outside Denver for free. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was what family does, but the truth was uglier. I was scared. Of confrontation, of being called selfish, of hearing them say again that I was too sensitive. So I stayed quiet. Even when Mallory threw out my vintage reading chair because it clashed with the new palette. Even when her husband Nick turned my home office into his personal crypto cave. Even when their daughter plastered my dining room with posters and LED lights without asking. I gritted my teeth and smiled, because that's what I was taught: be the good one. Be generous. Be the rock. But all rocks erode eventually. When I landed in the hospital last spring, my stomach felt like it was trying to chew itself apart. It turned out to be acute appendicitis with complications. 1 hour later, I was under anesthesia. The next, I was being asked about my emergency contact. Mallory came, late, wearing a white blazer, platform sandals, and a look that said she already wanted to leave. I told her I was scared, that I didn't know how much insurance would cover, that I needed help with the paperwork, that my painkillers were messing with my memory. She laughed. "Ro, please, I'm not great with admin, and we've got to budget for Elle's braces this year. Oh, and her grad trip? You'll figure it out. You always do." Then she kissed the air near my forehead, adjusted her sunglasses, and left. That moment didn't break me. It clarified me. Back home, surrounded by half-finished renovations I never authorized, I realized something brutal. I had let them rewrite the script of my life. I was no longer the homeowner, just a ghost in the background of their dream life. Nick called me roomie, Mallory filmed house tour reels and tagged them @Mal Lake House. My name never came up. They treated my generosity like a blank check, but they'd forgotten I write code for a living. And if there's one thing I know, it's how to pull a system apart from the inside. 3 weeks later, still sore and on a strict post-op diet, I returned home. They didn't greet me, just told me to keep it quiet. Elle's studying. I didn't say a word. I went straight to the basement where I kept all my old records deed, mortgage statements, a lockbox with the home title, but the lockbox was gone. My hands didn't shake. I didn't scream. I went to my friend Kira instead. Kira is a paralegal who used to date my brother. She's direct, strategic, and fiercely loyal to women who've been underestimated. We sat at her kitchen table. I told her everything quietly, mechanically. Halfway through, she pulled out her laptop and started typing. 30 minutes later, she turned the screen to me. "Rowan, you're not listed as the current title holder anymore." I blinked. "What?" 2 months ago, a transfer was filed, legally notarized. No red flags in the system, but something stinks. I stared at the document. There it was. My name, scratched out, Nick's, in its place. Mallory had forged a transfer, likely while I was still doped up on painkillers. Probably having me sign delivery receipts she assured me were nothing. I felt something cold and familiar curl in my gut, but I didn't flinch. "What do I do?" I asked. Kira smiled. "You get smart, you build your case, you wait." She helped me install discrete security cameras. We pulled credit reports, tracked expenses, started logging every cent spent from my accounts without authorization. And then we waited. Waited while Mallory planned a massive garden party for Elle's graduation, inviting influencers and real estate agents to our stunning lake house. Waited while Nick started leaking hints online about turning the property into a boutique retreat. I let them fly high, because I knew something they didn't. I'd already hired a forensic document examiner. I'd already filed a quiet complaint with the city about unpermitted construction. And I was already weeks into preparing to sue them into the next decade. This time, I wasn't going to ask for help. I was going to take back what was mine. Not with rage, but with receipts. Mallory's party prep was in full swing by the time June rolled around. Strings of fairy lights hung from my pergola, now painted white without my permission. Rows of wine glasses sparkled on borrowed trays, and I caught Nick instructing the landscaper to make the bushes look more European. I watched it all through the security cameras Kira had helped me install, from the hidden one in the doorbell to the ceiling cam disguised in the corner of the sunroom. They were all streaming to my phone. I never knew surveillance could feel like justice, but when you've been erased from your own life, watching the ones who wronged you dig their own graves is surprisingly soothing. They had no idea I wasn't just watching, I was documenting. The day before the party, I met with Ava Ruiz, the real estate attorney Kira recommended. Ava was sharp, no nonsense, and had the kind of eyes that made people stop lying mid-sentence. I laid everything out: deed records, forged signature samples, before and after images from the home renovation. When I showed her the footage of Mallory referring to herself as owner of the Latimer Lake House, Ava leaned back and exhaled. "Oh, they messed with the wrong woman." She drafted the cease and desist letter that afternoon. "Once this party starts, we deliver it publicly. They want an audience. We'll give them one." Back home, I sorted through what little I had left. Mallory had boxed up my belongings into 6 sad cardboard containers labeled miscellaneous. My grandmother's china was wrapped in Elle's old hoodie. My diploma was bent at the corners. My childhood journals had been shoved under patio cushions. It was like watching someone toss your memories into a donation bin. But I didn't cry, not anymore. That night, I received a text from Mallory. "Please don't bring drama tomorrow. This event is important for Elle's future and our brand. Be kind. I stared at it, then typed back, "Of course, I wouldn't dream of ruining your big moment." Which wasn't a lie. I wasn't going to ruin it. I was going to reclaim it. When the guests started arriving the next day, I stood across the street in a parked car with Kira and Ava, watching through the live feed. Mallory wore a lavender dress, hair styled in soft waves, and smiled like the queen of a domain she didn't own. Nick hovered near the bar, sipping from a copper mug, nodding like a guy who thought he'd finally made it. Ava checked her watch. Showtime? We crossed the street. Kira handed me the official envelope. I felt it in my hand, thick, sharp, real. The moment we stepped onto the property, Mallory's smile faltered. "Rowan," she said, laughing nervously, "what are you?" I didn't let her finish. I raised my voice, not loud, but clear. "To everyone here, I apologize for the interruption. I just have something I need to deliver." Guests turned, phones tilted. I walked to Mallory and handed her the envelope. "This is a cease and desist. You've illegally claimed this house, the renovations, the party, the influencer deals, it's all built on fraud, and now it ends." She blinked. "This is a joke, right?" Nick stepped forward. "You're making a scene, not cool." "No, Nick, you made the scene," I replied. "When you forged my signature, when you pulled a home equity loan without my consent, when you pretended I was some forgettable side character in your dream life." Murmurs spread, guests whispered. Kira added, "This house legally belongs to Rowan. Every document you've seen otherwise is forged. We have evidence, witnesses, and surveillance." Mallory's jaw dropped. Nick turned pale. "Rowan, please let's talk privately." "No," I said, "you've spent years performing. Let the final act be public." Someone recorded, someone else whispered, "Oh my God, is this real?" And just like that, the tone shifted. I didn't stay long, just enough for the message to settle like dust on glass, visible, inevitable, sharp. As we walked away, I heard Mallory yelling behind me, but I didn't turn around. I didn't have to. The next day, news hit the local real estate circuit. Influencer couple accused of property fraud. The video of the confrontation had gone viral. Hashtags popped up, "Lake House Lie", #fake estate. Mallory shut down her account. Nick deleted his business page. Elle posted something vague about taking a break from the noise. Meanwhile, Ava filed a civil suit, fraud, forgery, unlawful enrichment. They tried to countersue, claimed I had gifted them the home, claimed I had amnesia from surgery, that I was unstable. But the truth was written in paperwork, in timestamps, in ink strokes that didn't match mine. The forensic report was clear. The signature wasn't mine. The notary listed had died 2 years ago. Game over. The silence after exposure is different from the silence of betrayal. One is suffocating, the other is liberating. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one hiding. Mallory and Nick went underground. Their once busy social media feeds vanished. Their friends, the ones who toasted in my dining room and tagged their accounts for aesthetic clout, fell away like petals from a fake bouquet. The online support turned sour fast. Comments flooded in. Wait, this isn't even their house. So the renovation was funded with stolen money. Influencer jail when... But the real hit wasn't digital, it was legal. Ava moved fast. The court issued an injunction freezing the home equity loan funds still in their account. Within weeks, a judge declared the house legally and solely mine. Every renovation had been unauthorized. Every claim they'd made was nullified. They were ordered to vacate within 10 days. On day 9, I pulled into my driveway just in time to see the moving truck pull away. The house looked bruised, the paint scuffed, my hydrangeas dead, but it was mine again. Inside, it smelled like a stranger's perfume and burnt sage. The kitchen sparkled, but not with warmth, with the cold gleam of countertops bought with lies. The open floor plan, once my quiet retreat, now felt like an Instagram set abandoned mid-shoot. I didn't cry, I got to work. Room by room, I began to restore it. Not back to what it was, but forward. To what I needed it to be now. I kept the cabinets but changed the hardware. I painted the walls a deep, defiant navy. I framed photos of the people who had actually shown up: Kira, Ava, my college roommate Elena, who sent soup and sarcastic memes every night during the lawsuit. I even reclaimed the fireplace. They'd hung a massive print of their initials over it. I replaced it with a mirror. One evening, while unpacking the boxes they'd left untouched in the garage, I found a sealed envelope. It was addressed to me, Mallory's handwriting. Inside a letter, 5 pages. It was more defensive than apologetic. She blamed stress, said she thought I was too busy to care, claimed Nick panicked when bills piled up and thought they'd just fix it later. She wrote, "I know it looked bad, but we thought you'd understand. Family understands." No, family doesn't forge your name and lock you out of your own house. I tossed the letter into the fireplace. Weeks passed, life settled. The court ordered them to repay $212,000, what remained of the fraudulent loan after renovation costs and fees. They filed for bankruptcy 2 months later. Mallory took a job managing social media for a frozen yogurt chain. Nick moved back with his parents. Their daughter, Elle. She started college that fall. She never reached out, not until I received an email from her school address. The subject line read, "I didn't know." It was short, honest. "Rowan, I saw everything. I'm sorry. I used to think you were just cold, that you didn't care, but now I understand why you kept your distance. I hope you're okay, I really do. L." I didn't reply immediately, I let it sit. Not out of bitterness, but because I wanted to be sure that whatever I said next came from truth, not spite. 3 days later, I wrote, "L. I am okay. It took a long time to be. I'm glad you see things clearly now. That takes strength. Keep growing. Be better than what you came from. R." And I meant it, because this wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about healing. A few weeks later, I hosted a dinner in the house. Nothing fancy, just wine, takeout from my favorite Thai place, and a few friends who had stood by me when I had nothing left but the truth. Kira brought a houseplant and a card that said, "Not all queens wear crowns, some own deeds." We laughed until the lights dimmed outside. When everyone left, I stood by the window and looked out over the lake. It was quiet again. But this time, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. It's strange how quickly something can stop haunting you once you own it. That house used to echo with resentment. Every corner held a memory I didn't choose. Every fixture reminded me that I was erased until I wasn't. Now, when I walk through the hallway, I don't feel like a trespasser. I feel like the architect of my own life. One morning, I stood on the porch, sipping coffee from a mug Kira got me. It read villain in someone else's story, hero in my own. I laughed the first time I saw it. Now I use it every day. Across the street, the new neighbors waved. They'd just moved in. A couple with 2 kids and a rescue dog who barked every morning like clockwork. It was chaos, but the good kind, the human kind. I was finally living, not just surviving. And then the knock came. I opened the door expecting a package. Instead, it was Nick. He looked thinner, tired, like someone who had aged 3 years in 3 months. "Rowan," he said, voice dry, "can we talk?" I didn't step aside. "You've got 30 seconds, I said. He shifted his weight. I wanted to say sorry for everything. We messed up. I messed up. I let Mallory run with things I should have stopped, and now it's all gone. I studied him, the man who once slept under my roof rent-free, who let his wife bulldoze me with a smile and a hashtag. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for relief from guilt, from consequences, from himself. "I'm not the one you should apologize to." I said, "Try Elle. She's the one who has to unlearn all of it." He looked like he might argue. Then he nodded. "Okay." "And Nick," I added, "you don't get to rewrite it. You didn't just let things happen. You benefited from them." He didn't answer, just turned and walked away. I closed the door. Not with anger, with finality. That was the last piece. No confrontation, no yelling, just boundaries drawn so clean they couldn't be crossed again. The months that followed were simple in the best way. I went back to work, picked up a few contracts, rebuilt my emergency fund. I repainted the guest room a soft olive green and turned it into a reading lounge, a space just for me. Sometimes, Kira would drop by unannounced with baked goods and neighborhood gossip. Sometimes Ava would call and ask for my take on a new legal clause, then pivot into TV recommendations. We grew closer not through drama, but through constancy. One afternoon, I got a notification from a real estate platform. My home was featured not as an influencer set, not as a backdrop to someone else's brand, as an architectural case study, craftsman restoration with legal backbone, a tale of real ownership. I smiled. Later that night, I walked outside with a blanket and a thermos of tea. The stars were out, the lake shimmered, the wind brushed the porch like an old friend. I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago, overworked, overridden, afraid of being seen as difficult. She wouldn't have recognized the one sitting there now, and she would have been proud. Because I didn't burn down my past, I rebuilt around it. Because I didn't let betrayal define me, I used it as a blueprint. Because peace, real peace, isn't something someone gives you. It's something you fight for in silence, in shadows, in every quiet decision to choose yourself. I closed my eyes and whispered the same words I now lived by. I am not who they remember. I am who I built. 6 months passed. The lawsuit was officially closed. The court ruled that the deed transfer had been forged, the loan fraudulent, and the renovations unauthorized. Mallory and Nick avoided jail. Barely, but their names were now tangled in legal databases and internet infamy. Mallory tried to pivot her brand, but authentic living doesn't sell when people see your authenticity as theft in disguise. Elle reached out again. This time it wasn't about them, it was about her. I'm not proud of how I talked to you, she said in an email, but I also didn't know better. You were the only adult in our lives who told the truth, even when no one wanted to hear it. I replied simply, you're not responsible for their choices, but you are responsible for the ones you make now. That was enough. A crack of light in a relationship that had once been painted over with lies. Meanwhile, my house had become something else entirely. Not just restored, but renewed. I hosted dinners now, real ones, with mismatched dishes and laughter that didn't echo off cold walls. Friends came and sat for hours. Kira always brought wine. Ava brought gossip. And I brought peace. I started teaching part-time guest lecturing at a local college about structural integrity in architecture. The irony wasn't lost on me, because what I was really teaching them was how to build something that didn't collapse under pressure, something that didn't lean on bad assumptions or shortcut support beams. Kind of like life. One of my students asked me once, "What do you do when the people you trust most let you down?" I paused before answering. "You build anyway," I told him, "and the next time, you make sure the foundation is yours." He nodded slowly, like something deep had clicked, and maybe that was the final gift this entire experience gave me, the ability to see it not just as loss, but as instruction. Then came a Sunday I'll never forget. Bright, breezy, and ordinary. I was reading on the porch when a car I didn't recognize pulled up. A woman stepped out mid-50s, sharp eyes, humble posture. "You don't know me," she said, "but I'm Mallory's mother." My stomach clenched. She held up a hand. "I'm not here to defend her," she said. "I'm here because I saw the footage. I read the filings. I raised her better than this. And I needed to see the woman who stood through all of it and didn't break." I didn't speak. She continued, "I lost touch with her years ago, when she started thinking image mattered more than character. But I saw something in your story that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, not all of us get erased." I opened the gate and invited her in. We didn't talk about Mallory, not really. We talked about books, about legacy, about how some women are raised to smile and swallow and disappear, and how some choose to rewrite that script, no matter the cost. She left an hour later with tears in her eyes and a cup of coffee she said was better than anything on the West Side. I smiled, grateful that healing doesn't always come in the package you expect. After that day, I stopped checking for updates about Mallory or Nick. I didn't care anymore. I had outgrown the need for closure. And on my 41st birthday, I threw myself a party not out of loneliness or statement, but celebration. My real friends came. Elle sent a handmade card. Kira gave a speech that made me laugh so hard I cried. At midnight, I stood alone in the kitchen, barefoot, music low. I stared at the cabinets I'd built twice, at the space I'd fought to protect. And I said quietly to no one, "You made it, finally." There was no applause, no grand gesture, just peace, and that was enough. Because what I'd really learned, is that power doesn't come from revenge. It comes from remembering who you are even after everyone else forgets. It comes from reclaiming your space, your voice, your narrative. It comes from surviving betrayal and still choosing grace. So if you're listening, if you've ever been underestimated, overused, written out of the story, know this. You don't have to scream to make noise. You don't have to destroy to rebuild. You just have to decide that you're done being a chapter in someone else's fantasy and ready to write your own ending. This was mine, and now it's yours too.
You just have to decide that you're done being a chapter in someone else's fantasy and ready to write your own ending. This was mine.